When the first emperor of China died, the doors to his tomb were sealed, and hundreds of his concubines were buried alive inside with him. Not because they betrayed him, not because they failed him, but because even in death, Qin Shi Huang refused to be alone. This was the same man who unified China, crushed 6 rival kingdoms, and declared himself ruler of all under heaven. A man powerful enough to standardize language, money, and thought itself. And yet, he spent the last years of his life terrified, running from assassins, drinking poison every day, desperately trying to become immortal. This is the story of how the most powerful man on earth tried to cheat death and accidentally designed the perfect way to destroy himself. This is how to fail at immortality. Before we can truly appreciate the sheer scale of his failure to conquer death, we have to understand the scale of his success in conquering everything else. You don't just wake up one day and decide to drink poison because an alchemist told you it's a health shake. No, you have to build up to that level of confidence. And Qin Shi Huang, born Ying Zheng, had confidence in spades. Because for his entire life, everything he touched, he conquered. He ascended to the throne of the Qin state as a boy of 13. At that time, the land we now call China was a fractured, bleeding battleground of 7 major kingdoms, locked in a centuries-long conflict known as the Warring States period. It was a time of brutal warfare, shifting alliances, and constant bloodshed. To the young king, this wasn't a complex geopolitical landscape. It was a checklist. Over the next 2.5 decades, he methodically, ruthlessly, and brilliantly dismantled his rivals. He didn't just win battles, he annihilated armies. He didn't just defeat kings, he erased kingdoms from the map. His armies, armed with the latest military technology like crossbows and fueled by a hyper-efficient meritocratic system, were an unstoppable force. He moved with a speed and decisiveness that left his enemies reeling. One by one, the states of Han, Zhao, Wei, Chu, Yan, and Qi fell before him. By 221 BCE, the wars were over. The warring states were no more. Ying Zheng stood alone, the undisputed master of Tianxia, all under heaven. He had achieved what no one had ever done before. He had unified China. And with this unprecedented achievement, he decided a simple title like king was no longer sufficient. He invented a new one, Shi Huangdi, which translates to First August Emperor. He was Qin Shi Huang, the first in a line of emperors he believed would rule for 10,000 generations. His ambition didn't stop at conquest. He embarked on a revolutionary and often brutal project of standardization. He standardized currency, forcing everyone to use the same round coins with square holes. He standardized weights and measures. He even standardized the width of cart axles, essentially creating a national highway system where any cart could travel on any road in the empire. Most famously, he standardized the written language, creating a script that, with modifications, is still in use today. This was a man who looked at a chaotic world and saw only opportunities for order. His order. He connected existing fortifications to create the precursor to the Great Wall of China, a monumental effort to define and defend the borders of his new empire. Imagine the mindset of such a person. You have ended centuries of war. You have forged a nation from the fire of 7 kingdoms. You have commanded hundreds of thousands of laborers to build walls and canals that reshape the very earth. You have imposed a single will on millions of people, dictating the money they use, the words they write, and the roads they travel. The world, for you, is not a thing that happens. It is a thing you shape. Cause and effect are your playthings. Problems aren't obstacles. They are simply tasks to be completed. So when you begin to contemplate the one problem that has plagued every human since the dawn of time, the fact that we all must die, your solution isn't acceptance. It's conquest. Death to Qin Shi Huang wasn't a natural law. It was just another kingdom that hadn't been brought to heel yet. And he, the unifier of all under heaven, was just the man for the job. This titanic ego, forged in the crucible of absolute victory, was about to collide with the immovable object of human mortality, and the results would be spectacular. So, you've conquered China, standardized everything from money to axle widths, and are feeling pretty good about your plan to live for 10,000 generations. What's the first step in our guide to failing at immortality? Develop a soul-crushing, all-consuming paranoia. Qin Shi Huang's obsession with eternal life didn't spring from a philosophical desire to witness the future. It was born from a much more primal emotion, sheer, abject terror. The man who had conquered millions lived in mortal fear of a single, well-placed blade. And to be fair, he had his reasons. The path to unifying an empire is paved with the corpses of your enemies, and their friends and families tend to hold a grudge. Assassination attempts were a very real and persistent threat. There was the famous attempt by Jing Ke, an assassin sent by the state of Yan, who concealed a dagger in a rolled-up map. The attempt failed in a frantic scene right in the throne room, leaving the emperor shaken but alive. Another attempt involved a musician named Gao Jianli, a friend of Jing Ke, who tried to bludgeon the emperor with a lute weighted with lead. He too failed. Then there was the warlord who hired a strongman to hurl a massive 160-pound cone-shaped hammer at the emperor's carriage. This also failed, mainly because the emperor, in his growing paranoia, had started using identical decoys in his entourage. These close calls didn't make the emperor reflect on his governance. Instead, they supercharged his fear of death and solidified his belief that the world was filled with hidden dangers. His court became a fortress of suspicion. He started to believe that death wasn't just a biological process. It was an active entity, a conspirator sending agents to get him. And if death was coming for him, he would simply have to make himself impossible to find. This is where his paranoia went into architectural overdrive. He reportedly built a network of over 200 palaces in and around his capital, Xianyang. But these weren't just for luxury. Historical accounts, most notably from the Han Dynasty historian Sima Qian, tell us these palaces were connected by a web of secret, covered walkways and tunnels. The emperor could move between his residences completely unseen. No one, not even his most senior officials, was ever supposed to know which palace he was in on any given day. To reveal his location was an offense punishable by death. He became a ghost in his own machine, a ruler who governed from the shadows because he was too afraid of the light. His paranoia extended to his interactions with others. He became irritable and prone to violent rages. According to Sima Qian, he once grew angry when he saw a meteor fall to Earth, upon which was inscribed a prophecy of his dynasty's fall. In a fit of fury, he had everyone in the surrounding area executed, and the meteor itself pulverized into dust, as if he could erase the message by destroying the medium. On another occasion, upon hearing a rumor that some of his court alchemists were mocking his quest for immortality behind his back, he allegedly had over 460 scholars rounded up and buried alive in a giant pit. This crushing fear created the perfect breeding ground for his immortality obsession. Every day he survived an assassin's plot was a victory. But it was a victory that only highlighted the fragility of his existence. He wasn't just looking for a long life. He was looking for invulnerability. He wanted a permanent solution to the problem of assassins, illness, and old age. He wanted to graduate from being a mortal that men couldn't kill to a god that death couldn't touch. His paranoia was so intense that it likely impaired his judgment, making him susceptible to even the most outlandish promises. It created a desperate, gaping need for a miracle. And in the courts of ancient China, there was never a shortage of so-called magicians and alchemists ready to supply one. His terror of a sudden, violent death made him the perfect customer for a slow, self-inflicted one. Having successfully established a baseline of crippling paranoia, the next step in our guide to failing at immortality is to outsource the problem. Specifically, by funding massive, ludicrously expensive, and ultimately fruitless expeditions to the ends of the earth. If you can't find the elixir of life in your own backyard, it must be somewhere else, right? This was the logic of a man who could move armies and build walls, and he applied the same project management approach to find an eternal youth. The most famous of these ventures was led by a court sorcerer and alchemist named Xu Fu. Xu Fu was, by all accounts, a master of the sales pitch. He told Qin Shi Huang that far out in the eastern seas there were 3 mythical islands: Penglai, Fangzhang, and Yingzhou. On these islands lived the immortals, 1,000-year-old beings who held the secret to eternal life. All Xu Fu needed was a fleet, a crew, and a boatload of resources, and he would sail out and bring back the elixir. For an emperor terrified of dying, this was an irresistible offer. Around 219 BCE, Qin Shi Huang approved the project, and he didn't do it by halves. Historical records suggest Xu Fu was given a massive fleet and a mind-boggling crew of thousands of young boys and girls. This wasn't just an exploratory mission. It was a floating colonial settlement. The logic, perhaps, was that the immortals would be more willing to share their secrets if the emperor sent a tribute of pure, young subjects. Xu Fu set sail with great fanfare and disappeared over the horizon. Years passed, no elixir. Finally, Xu Fu returned, empty-handed. But he came with an excuse that is truly legendary in its audacity. He claimed their path was blocked by a giant sea creature. His request? He needed archers to sail with him and slay the beast. And the truly incredible part? Qin Shi Huang agreed. In 210 BCE, the emperor himself, on one of his tours of the empire, accompanied the fleet to the coast, where his imperial archers shot and killed a large fish. With the obstacle removed, Xu Fu set sail once again. He took his ships and his thousands of young men and women and sailed east. He never returned. The historian Sima Qian wrote that Xu Fu found a land of flat plains and wide swamps, liked what he saw, and proclaimed himself king. Many historians and legends suggest that this place was Japan. While impossible to prove definitively, there are shrines and legends dedicated to Xu Fu in Japan to this day. So, while the first emperor didn't get his elixir, he may have accidentally funded a significant cultural and technological transfer in ancient East Asian history. But his search wasn't limited to the East. Recent discoveries have shown the true, all-encompassing nature of his desperation. It has been confirmed that a stone inscription found high on the Tibetan plateau is genuine. Located at a staggering altitude of 4,300 meters, over 14,000 feet, near Jialing Lake, the carving documents a previously unknown westward expedition. Written in the standardized script of the Qin dynasty, the inscription records that the emperor commanded a high-ranking official to lead a group of alchemists to the Kunlun Mountains to collect yao, a term for medicinal herbs. But in this context, almost certainly ingredients for the elixir of life. This discovery is monumental. It proves the emperor was sending missions in opposite directions, to the mythical islands of the sea in the east and the sacred mountains of the west. The expedition to Tibet, occurring in 210 BCE, the very last year of his life, shows the fever pitch his obsession had reached. He was throwing everything he had at the problem from every possible angle. It was an ancient world equivalent of funding a mission to Mars and a deep-sea submersible expedition at the same time. All in the hope one of them would bring back a magic pill. These grand expeditions were a masterclass in failing with style. But his most fatal failure was happening much closer to home. While his envoys were off chasing myths, Qin Shi Huang was hedging his bets with a more direct approach. This brings us to the most crucial and darkest step in our guide to failing at immortality. If you can't find the elixir, have a team of questionable experts cook it up for you in your own palace. The emperor's court was crawling with alchemists, all promising to unlock eternal life. And in the bizarre logic of ancient Chinese alchemy, one substance stood out as the key ingredient: mercury. Why mercury? The reasoning, in a way, made a strange kind of sense. Mercury, or quicksilver, is the only metal that is liquid at room temperature, giving it an almost magical quality. Alchemists saw in its unique nature a reflection of life itself. The logic went something like this: if you ingest this living metal, its properties will transfer to your body, halting decay and making you eternal. It was a theory that was poetic and lethally, catastrophically wrong. Qin Shi Huang, the man of action, became the lead test subject. He eagerly began consuming daily elixirs of life, prepared by his court alchemists, often in the form of pills made of pure liquid mercury and cinnabar, mercury sulfide. He was, quite literally, taking daily doses of a potent neurotoxin in the belief that it was making him immortal. It is perhaps the greatest irony in the history of medicine. A man taking poison as a cure for death. What would these mercury pills have actually done to him? We know today that mercury poisoning has devastating effects. Chronic exposure leads to tremors, irritability, extreme mood swings, insomnia, memory loss, and eventually kidney and liver failure, madness, and cognitive collapse. Now, reconsider the emperor's behavior in his later years. His legendary paranoia, his explosive rages, his irrational decisions like burying scholars alive. It's highly probable that his daily immortality treatments were actively making him more unstable, more paranoid, and more tyrannical. He was in a vicious feedback loop. His fear of death made him take mercury, and the mercury, in turn, likely amplified his fear and paranoia into a full-blown psychosis. Every pill he swallowed, believing it was a step toward godhood, was a step closer to a complete physical and mental breakdown. The sheer scale of his commitment to this flawed science is breathtaking. Soil samples taken from the area around his tomb mound have revealed unusually high concentrations of mercury. While much of this is attributed to the mercury rivers within his tomb, it also supports the historical accounts of widespread mercury use in his court. Recent surveys have even identified ancient cinnabar mines, believed to have been the primary source for the vast quantities of mercury he required for both his elixirs and his tomb. This wasn't a casual hobby. It was a state-sponsored industrial operation dedicated to slowly poisoning the emperor. He had the greatest minds and vastest resources on Earth, but fell for the oldest trick in the book, the quick fix. And as he entered the final year of his life, the bill for his alchemical experiments was about to come due. By 210 BCE, Qin Shi Huang was a man running out of time, and he knew it. His body was failing, a fact he likely attributed to not yet having found the perfect elixir, rather than the steady diet of heavy metals he was consuming. So, in a final, desperate burst of activity, he embarked on his 5th grand tour of the empire. This tour was a multi-pronged effort. It was a display of power and a mobile quest for immortality. This was the tour during which he personally oversaw the second departure of Shu Fu, sending his archers to kill a large fish to clear the path to the mythical island of Penglai. It was a tour fueled by desperation. But the man at the center of the imperial procession was profoundly unwell. The chronic mercury poisoning was taking its final toll, likely causing extreme fatigue, organ failure, and severe neurological distress. Then, at a palace in a place called Shakyu, more than 2 months' journey from the capital, the emperor's health collapsed completely. The end, when it came, was swift and grim. At the age of 49, the first emperor of China died. He did not die in battle. He was not felled by an assassin's blade. He died because he had systematically poisoned himself with the very medicine he believed would make him live forever. His quest for immortality didn't just fail. It was the direct cause of his premature death. His death immediately created a crisis. The emperor had died far from the capital, and his 2 most powerful advisors were with him: the chief eunuch, Zhao Gao, and the prime minister, Li Si. The emperor's chosen heir was his eldest son, Fu Su. However, Zhao Gao and Li Si feared Fu Su and had their own preferred candidate, the younger, more pliable son, Hu Hai. So they hatched a conspiracy. They decided to conceal the emperor's death. They forged a decree from Qin Shi Huang, ordering Prince Fu Su and his most loyal general to commit suicide. Then they began the long, slow journey back to the capital, with the emperor's body still in his grand carriage, pretending he was alive. This is where the story descends into a grim, macabre farce. As the procession traveled under the hot summer sun, the emperor's body began to decompose. To mask the growing odor of decay, the conspirators ordered a cart loaded with salted, rotting fish to travel alongside the emperor's carriage. They announced that the emperor had developed a sudden craving for fish, and the smell of the rotting seafood was so overpowering that it covered the scent of the rotting emperor. Imagine the scene. The most powerful man in the world, the unifier of China, the would-be immortal, being paraded across his empire as a decaying corpse, his presence masked by a wagon of stinking fish. It is an end so ignominious, so profoundly ironic. It feels like something out of a satirical play. After a journey of 2 months, the procession finally reached the capital. The conspiracy succeeded, and the death of Qin Shi Huang was finally announced. His grand project of living forever had ended in a secret, smelly, and pathetic demise. But the emperor's story wasn't quite over. In a way, his true bid for immortality was only just beginning. Qin Shi Huang may have failed spectacularly at living forever, but he had a backup plan. And it was a backup plan of such breathtaking scale that it has, in a strange way, granted him the very immortality he craved. The plan was simple. If he couldn't take his empire with him into the next life, he would build a new one there. From the moment he ascended the throne at age 13, work had begun on his tomb. For 38 years, a workforce that historical texts estimate to be as large as 700,000 laborers toiled to construct his final resting place. What Qin Shi Huang built was an entire subterranean empire, a sprawling 22-square-mile mausoleum complex designed to be a perfect replica of his worldly domain. The centerpiece is the tomb mound itself, a man-made hill covering an underground palace. According to the historian Sima Qian, this palace is a scale model of China. The ceiling is a map of the heavens, studded with jewels to represent the stars. The floor is a map of his empire. And most astonishingly, the great rivers of China were recreated using vast quantities of flowing, liquid mercury. Modern soil tests showing high mercury concentrations in the mound strongly suggest this incredible account may be true. The entire palace was a self-contained universe for him to rule over for all eternity, protected by booby traps like crossbows rigged to fire at any would-be tomb robbers. And what is an emperor without his army? In 1974, a group of farmers digging a well stumbled upon one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of all time. They found the Terracotta Army, an army of an estimated 8,000 life-sized ceramic soldiers, each with a unique face, standing in silent, battle-ready formation. There are infantrymen, archers, cavalry, and officers in their chariots. They were once brightly painted, a vibrant, silent legion ready for his command. Further excavations have revealed pits filled with terracotta officials, musicians, and even acrobats, meant to provide administration and entertainment for his eternal court. There are bronze birds in an underground garden and detailed bronze chariots pulled by bronze horses. This wasn't a burial. It was a relocation. He saw death not as an end, but as a transfer to a new post, and he was determined to arrive fully staffed. The central tomb, the great underground palace with its mercury rivers, has never been excavated. Archaeologists are held back by concerns over irreparable damage and the very real danger posed by the potentially toxic mercury vapor. So the first emperor still rests undisturbed, surrounded by his treasures and his silent clay legions. And here lies the ultimate, beautiful irony. Qin Shi Huang's obsession with immortality led him to drink mercury, which killed him. But that same obsession led him to build a tomb of such magnificence that it has made him unforgettable. His fear of being forgotten in death drove him to create a monument that has ensured his legacy. He failed to conquer biology, but he triumphed over obscurity. He may have only lived to be 49, but his story, his tomb, and his terracotta guards have achieved a form of immortality he could never have planned. He is a testament to the fact that sometimes The greatest legacies grow from the spectacular ruins of our most ambitious failures. The story of Qin Shi Huang is a darkly funny, tragic, and epic tale of a man who achieved the impossible, only to be defeated by the inevitable. His quest serves as the ultimate cautionary tale about unchecked ambition and the folly of trying to outsmart death. But it also gave the world one of its greatest wonders. His desperation gave us a window into the past, and his failure gave him a story that will be told forever. So where does he land on the spectrum? Visionary ruler who forged a nation, or a paranoid madman driven to an early grave by his own ego? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this guide on how not to live forever, please consider subscribing for more stories about history's most fascinating failures and legacies. Thanks for watching.